20th, 2018. And this is really a foundational and fundamental broadcast. This really talks about what wilderness therapy is and also what makes Evoke therapy programs unique, our approach, and what distinguishes Evoke therapy programs from other wilderness therapy programs. So I'll begin by talking about how it works, what wilderness therapy is, and how we use a lot of various aspects from the therapeutic ecosystem, if you will, to support children and families in this process. The first thing that happens in an intervention like Evoke is that there's a disruption in the system and an immersion into a new system. I cannot emphasize enough the value of getting out of your context, getting into another context, and how doing that illuminates your own context. For a lot, it's as simple as being grateful for what they had. And perhaps in more profound ways and subtle ways, it's also being able to see yourself, your family, what was going on in your life more clearly. It's hard to see it from the inside. Like the two fish swimming along in the ocean, and the older fish comes by and says, "How's the water today, boys?" And after he passes by, the two young fish say to each other, "What is water?" It's hard to see it until you get out of it. And so getting into a new system, a new context, new relationships, new kinds of people. I always joke about the fact that field staff, the ones that are with your children 7 days a week, they don't look like, they don't smell like you. They have similar core values to you, but they look alternative and counterculture. And being out in the wilderness really does instill the same kind of values, ideas, and lessons that you want to be teaching and modeling to your children, but it does it through an alternative culture. The amplification and intensity, right? Everything is turned up in wilderness therapy. I can remember many years ago during one of my first discoveries of this where a child was complaining about having to take a shower because in the wilderness you cannot take things for granted, right? We can do that in our homes, right? We have climate control, we have running water, and in the wilderness it doesn't work that way. So he came up to the group of us. We were talking, myself and the staff, and he started to ask if he had to do it. And at one point, one of the staff members was going to just try to talk him into believing it and understanding it and doing it. And I said, it's okay. It's hard to do. It's not easy like it is at home. And I would be frustrated if I was you also. And the client, the student, kind of just looked at us and then walked away and went and took a shower. And so what happens for him, for us, is that all the lessons, all the ideas, all the relationships really get intensified and amplified in this process. You fill out an application when you send your child to Evoke therapy programs. But what happens is they show up and everything is revealed in the relationships with the staff who are their authority figures, with weather like lightning storms and rain and cold and hot weather in the summertime and the bugs that come during the early spring. Those are the kind of things that really do expose what's going on with your child in this process. So through the enactments, in other words, through the kind of the small universe that your children participate in a wilderness therapy group, we see the aspects of them that you saw at home, both the liabilities and the resources that they have. And we can put all of that under the magnifying glass of wilderness therapy and talk about it and help work with what's going on there. Natural and logical consequences, that's really an important part of wilderness therapy. You can't fight with Mother Nature. If you don't build a good shelter, you might wake up in the middle of the night drenched in rainwater. And no lecture is needed by the field staff when something like that happens. I remember almost my very first day in the spring of 1996 in a wilderness therapy program. When I was walking along, I only had 2 students in my group. I was walking along with one of the students, and he had haphazardly packed all of his gear in his backpack, and it was leaning over and lumpy and not fitted correctly. And as we were walking along, he was talking about his life. He was talking about his stresses, his trauma, his family, and this was intermixed with him talking about the discomfort of his backpack. And I remember just taking some time to just listen to the story as he went back and forth between the backpack and home life. And I remember thinking it's the same discussion. I couldn't hear in every case which he was talking about. It was hard, it was painful, it was uncomfortable. I don't want to do it, I can't do it. I don't know how to cope with it. I don't know how to deal with it. And so it shows up. The logical consequences that happen when you're camping, when you're living in a primitive living situation, are natural. I shared recently that NASA uses wilderness therapy to train its teams and to build trust and rapport among team members. And what they found was it doesn't work to have recreational activities. Perhaps what we might think of in the corporate world as team building activities where we're all working, there's a ping pong tournament at work. But that people have to be put in stressful, difficult situations, vulnerable situations in order to build that kind of team, that kind of trust, to kind of expose the strengths and weaknesses of each team member. And I think that's profound for all ages of students and clients that we work with. That NASA has discovered it, and they may not even know about the kind of wellness therapy that we do, but they're essentially mimicking it. Internal versus external locus of control, that's one of the first things that I remember reading about in the research about wellness therapy. This idea that external locus of control, which means that what happens to me determines my happiness, my meaning, my joy, my serenity, my pain, versus internal locus of control, which means what I do, how I respond to it, determines my success, my happiness, my meaning, my sadness, my suffering. And that wellness therapy does a fantastic job in that early research and all the research since then to shift the locus of control from external to internal. And we know this from sports psychology, from other fields in psychology, that successful people have a greater internal locus of control. I remember studying sports psychology in college, and great baseball players don't attribute a slump to great pitching. They attribute a slump to something they're forgetting or not doing well, and they work on that. It's a captive audience without walls, leading to leverage and engagement in therapy. One of my favorite stories is from a therapist that we had many years ago. And he shared with us the idea that he came from a residential treatment program to work with us, and he brought with him a couple of his clients that weren't quite ready to go home, but they didn't want to start a new therapist at the residential school that he was at. So he brought them with him. And he told us this story in staff meeting one time about one of the students he brought with him that had a history of being oppositional and resistant to therapy. And he said that working with the student at the residential treatment center, that the student would often shut down. So he's having his wilderness therapy session with the student in our program. And at one point, he says to the student, if you're not going to engage, I'm simply going to walk out of therapy. I've had enough of this. And the student very eagerly said, don't leave. Don't leave. I'm sorry. I've been trying to shut down like I did, and I need to talk. I want to talk. Because he was aware that this therapist was going to leave for 4 or 5 days before he came back again. And so there's a leverage. You don't want to misuse that as a wellness therapist, but there's a leverage that comes with it. When we bring out food to the kids, when we teach them how to cook, how to take care of themselves, the relationship changes between therapist and client, between staff member and client, when we're also taking care of them and helping them to be comfortable and to feed themselves and to take care of themselves. You kind of have this natural relationship that extends itself to other areas. We believe that there are so many aspects of wilderness therapy that make it tremendously unique. I was being interviewed today by somebody about wilderness therapy, and they said, "What drew you to it?" And I said, I found it by accident. A professor said to me that you should go check out a wilderness therapy program because my son went there and it was amazing. So I went and checked it out, got a job, and immediately I fell in love with it. I had never seen anything, although I'd worked with many different populations up to that point in many different settings. I'd never seen anything that was so dynamic. Subsequent to those early years, what we tried to do is create systems and support so that those dramatic changes in wilderness could be better maintained after the process, and that's part of where Evoke comes in. What makes wilderness therapy special? The use of metaphors. Metaphors, stories, dreams. These are all things that help to bypass resistance. And in wilderness therapy, a bow drill fire, a hike, setting up camp together, the sharing of chores, all replicate the challenges, the difficulties, expose the difficulties that students have. And you don't have to talk about therapy. This isn't often understood, but the most difficult resistance sometimes is cooperation, compliance, flight to health. Flight to health is this idea that clients come in and say, "I'm cured." And so wilderness therapy, again, exposes it. The small group living exposes it. Eventually, somewhere the child leaks and shows up, their true self, even if they're trying to be good, be compliant, be cooperative. So metaphors are a fantastic way of going around resistance. Many, many times I've changed the conversation from traditional therapy conversations to what was going on experientially in the group. Almost every week, in fact, I do it with at least one client. And therefore, we don't have to be talking about school and home and parents to be able to be talking about school and home and parents. We could talk about the things going on here and drawing the line, the connection between the two. Positive peer milieu is very powerful in wilderness therapy. You really do need in these small groups, you need each other to function well, to make times, to cook, to clean, to break camp. And so again, the peers do a lot of their own work. And because these are rolling admissions groups, we take advantage of the more senior members of the group to help the younger members, and it helps both equally, right? You become more invested, more aware of the thing that you're teaching. Resistant adolescence, and that can extend into young adulthood, of course. It's a great way to calm them down, to kind of smooth out the sharp edges. There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to run to, at least practically. You can throw a tantrum. You can beat a tree. The only agenda above therapy is keeping everybody safe. And so you find a way to slow things down for them. If they become defiant or angry, you pause. Wilderness therapy, folks, I want to be clear about this. And many students over the decades have said this. Wilderness therapy for many young people, adolescents and young adults, is the easiest thing that they'll ever do in some way. Now, it's absolutely replete with challenges in weather, challenges in group dynamics, but in some other ways, it's so supportive. Besides safety, it's therapy first. And there aren't many places in life where virtually you can have a therapy session in almost any given moment during the day. Self-esteem, the sense that comes from I can accomplish something, and self-efficacy of what I do makes a difference. That sense of accomplishment. Identity, pulling them out of their familiar context, their family, setting them up in a wilderness therapy group is part of what helps them to find themselves. to see themselves. The distance from family, from home contexts, is it's uncomfortable. It's not easy, but it becomes an essential part of the process for everybody in the family to discover themselves, because we're so blinded by the relationship sometimes, right? We're so reactive to each other, triggered by each other, sensitive and empathic to each other, even, that we lose sometimes in that process our own truth, our own sense of self. The group microcosm becomes, like I said, a replication of the family, pulling away the distraction and the defenses. I may have written this slide, this outline, I may have written this 20 years ago. Somewhere around then, I wrote it. And the digital detox that was happening 20 years ago, before smartphones, before the proliferation of the internet, where it is today at least, it was important. It was valuable. But it's nowhere near how helpful it is today, how necessary it is today. I saw a wonderful quote recently that says, being unplugged is the new luxury, right? So many of us can relate to that. Sometimes the greatest vacations and getaways that I have is when my cell phone won't work and I don't have internet. Sometimes for me, it's the only time I give myself permission to not respond, not be on call. And while it's not necessarily a work issue with young people, being unplugged from the pressures, from social media, from the instant connection and distraction that comes with all of that, can obviously be very important. There are other defenses and distractions too, but the digital detox might be the most profound in our day today. The inability to manipulate wilderness. I found this for myself. I remember one very, very cold and rainy October day where I was miserable and we were having a hard time getting a fire going because of the rain and the wind and this small tent that I was doing therapy sessions in. We were doing them in our sleeping bags. And I turned to the staff in between my first and my second session of the day and I said, I'm just going to do the sessions in the car unless you can talk me out of it. I'm miserable. And I remember the staff, his name was Steve, he said to me, just teach them how to suffer. Show them how to struggle. And that's really all I needed to remind me of what I was doing. And remind me that wilderness and primitive living does the work for us, right? It's a greater teacher in many cases than any of us can or will be. The rites of passage, right? The ceremonies, moving from stage to stage, being introduced into a group, saying goodbye to your family to go home to your family. There's so much lost today in terms of rites of passage in our society, right? It's diluted a lot. And Willer's therapy is a reintroduction to rites of passage and ceremony. A sterile assessment environment. It's not physically sterile, of course, but it's sterile in terms of, because you've removed so many variables, including substances, family, peers, you can start to make an assessment about what's going on with the child. What's the baseline level of functioning of diagnostics that's going on with them. You can have formal testing ordered during the process. Removal of negative influences. Sometimes, of course, they end up in a group where the group is struggling. Sometimes they end up in a group where they have a friend from home. But frankly, it's not the same as at home because you're watching students all the time. You're watching clients all the time. And so the difference between the influences at home and in a program like ours is that it's supervised. It's processed. You're intervening in real time. What's going on with them? There's a vulnerability that comes from it. I've mentioned that going through a couple of the points. You're definitely outside of your comfort zone. Even the students who have struggled the most in the program, in the decades that I've been doing it, those students have still had some sense of accomplishment because they did something difficult. And that does make a difference. I've said this before. The first thing that I learned about clients and students when I started working in wellness therapy was they're much stronger than they or their parents thought they were. They're much more resilient. And it's hard to realize that without being exposed to something outside of your comfort zone that you can't escape. The development of interdependence. You need each other. You have to ask for help. You can't do it alone. Nobody out there can do it easily alone. So you rely on each other and you have to ask for help. That's very important for a lot of people. The futility of the old ways of coping, they just don't work. It's important that for all of our clients and students, that for at least a portion of the program, they tried what worked for them before. So they can experience it not working. So what are the goals of wilderness therapy? What are the goals of my program? I think the first thing I noticed about it was that it's a wake-up call. You definitely get their attention. You create a new bottom. A lot of people say you're not going to change until you hit bottom. Intervention can be a bottom, right? I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in this. I want to try something new. It's hard to want to try something new unless it's what you're experiencing is unpleasant, right? People start drinking for the same reason they stop, to feel better. People stop problematic behaviors for the same reason that they started, to feel better. So wilderness, because it's such a dramatic culture shift, gets the attention in ways that others don't. You buy some time, right? It's a interrupting a crisis and stabilizing things. And I always say to parents, you do not want to make long-term decisions in a crisis. So wilderness therapy interrupts that, calms things down, gives everybody a chance to breathe, to assess, to explore, diagnose, and make decisions for the longer term. There's obviously a therapeutic benefit, right? Everything's individualized. I'm going to say this, and I'm biased, but I'm going to say it. Wilderness therapy is the most impactful intervention I've ever seen for almost every diagnosis I've ever worked with. Again, the challenge becomes maintaining those gains over time for every client, every student, every family. But the therapeutic benefit is tremendous. And even if that goes dormant, and the research shows that there is a dip after wilderness therapy, but even if that goes dormant, those lessons are there. I can't tell you how many letters, emails, messages I get from clients in their mid and late 20s, 30 years old. I get them all the time. Men who write to me and tell me about the lessons. I got one this week where a student said to me, "It's not all been perfect the 8 years since I've seen you, but I wanted to share with you that I was in a good place. I'd love to reconnect." Just to share that with you. Establishing family therapy. I think parents are willing to do work in family therapy program and wilderness therapy program, maybe more than another program because it's uncomfortable for them too. It's not easy to send your kid away, and that lends to a kind of focus and willingness. For us, the webinars and the podcasts and some of the things that we offer provide, I think, for a lot of people, an easy way in. Whereas walking into a therapist's office, first and foremost, might not be the easiest entry into all of this. Preparation for the next step. I talk about this idea of resignation to acceptance to investment. Sometimes clients and students can qualify for a long-term program that they would not qualify for unless they go through this program. Parents ask the question, will they forgive me? And the fact of the matter is they'll forgive you when you forgive yourself. and they'll accept things when you close the door. It's hard for a child to accept the boundary until they know that the door is closed, because there's always a lingering idea about negotiation up until that point. The softening effect, I talked about this, taking the sharp edges off of demonstrative and dangerous acting out disruptive behaviors. Wilderness therapy can do that. Changing levels of long-term or aftercare, long-term care or aftercare, right? Some parents don't know about wilderness therapy or are afraid of it, think it's going to be punitive or it's too dramatic, and so they go straight to a residential school or program. And oftentimes it takes months to make up for that work, many months to make up for that work, and sometimes they never do. Sometimes we get those clients. Socialization skills, right? There are few. I used to think about this when I was a kid. Maybe this is true for some of you. When I was younger, I would have best friends, and we got along famously. And then we would spend the night at each other's house, spend a day with each other. And by the end of about a 24-hour period, we weren't getting along so well. We were on each other's nerves. And wellness therapy does that. You can get along with people for short periods of time. Sometimes clients will say to me, they'll say, well, I get along really well with other people. It's just my family I don't get along with. And I respond, that's the only real challenge for all of us. If you can't get along with friends, you're really in trouble. But family is the real measure of how you're doing with relationships. And so wellness therapy does a great job of intensifying those relationships. Staff shifts that go 8 days. Staff come in for 8 days and they don't leave. There's no gaps. There's no shifts. It provides an assessment, like I said, both objective testing, meaning that you can have a testing psychologist come in and test your child, but also the natural observation, right? And we use all of those to kind of blend together to get a full picture. And of course, it's a substance abuse stable environment away from a lot of distractions. Evoke's founding principles, providing the best possible treatment for each client's whole health with comprehensive family support. Some of the things that we do, other programs do now. In 1998, when we started, almost nothing was done for family support. There may have been a reading assignment and a graduation ceremony, but outside of that, almost no family support until we founded our program. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. We think of ourselves as continually transforming, right? We're open to it. We're willing to change. And our inherent connection to the outdoors, we believe in. Even in our Summit Lodge, where we do intensive family work, 4 or 5, 6-day workshops. We believe there's something valuable in getting away, getting out in nature, going on a walk, the mindfulness that nature offers. What's the difference at Evoke? What makes Evoke unique? First of all, we accept the premise of a struggling child. We know that children are struggling in profound ways. And that's the charge that we accept. And once we have the child in our program, we surround the parents with support and services to help them. See, when you have a struggling child, and you parents know this, you need more resources. You can't operate in the same way as if your child is not struggling. So we give you resources. We feed you spiritually, emotionally. What I'm doing right this moment is a part of that vision. It's why we have the podcast. It's why we have the webinars. It's why we have the archive library. And really what we discovered many years ago, moving far beyond a simplistic recipe that if you follow these 8 steps, your child will turn out well, is that the process is like a hero's journey. You go out there to find the widget, to go after the treasure. But what happens on that journey is a transformation for you and for your child. So we think of it as a much fuller picture than a simple step-by-step kind of manualized therapy. At Evoke, we're committed to de-shaming everybody. It's one of my commitments in life is to de-shame the process for parents. If parents are struggling, it's because of their wounds. If children are struggling, it's because of their wounds. And so we try, we aspire to meet everybody at a place of understanding and compassion and healing. Like I said, it's not a simple cause and effect. One of my biggest frustrations is when I hear therapeutic programming that has that kind of simple recipe, guarantee. It's just a subtle way of blaming people. If you do it right, it'll go well. If you do it wrong, it won't. I know lots and lots of people who have made incredible efforts at helping loved ones who are struggling, and it didn't turn out okay. And I know a lot of people who have tried a lot less, and it turned out wonderfully. So looking at it from a systemic approach instead of a simple cause and effect approach is important. The mind, body, spirit curriculum, meditation, mindfulness, healthy eating, right? All of those aspects, the research shows that they work. They change the brain, they change our functioning, and they're tools that you can take forward. Company culture. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but we believe in healing the healer. From the top down, we believe in doing our own work. We support. I'm in the field right now. I'm covering a group right now, not just being the clinical director and doing all the parent work and the intensives, but I'm covering a group right now so that my partner can go on sabbatical. And we forced him to go on sabbatical. We told him he had to go on sabbatical. And we believe in supporting our staff that way, supporting our management team that way. And it makes a difference. When you're doing your own work, you're more capable of helping others. It's hard to take somebody where you haven't gone. It really is. I hear so many people talk about the difficulty that they have in finding a therapist. What my belief about that is that so many therapists think it's about their education, right? They want to pile up enough information and data and education and study and research. And when they get to a certain point, they'll be adequate. That's not the thing. It's the personal journey and the work that makes it possible for you to be there to support another person in ways that they need. And we aspire to that as a company culture. We do research, like I said early in the broadcast, compared to industry averages, Evoke therapy programs fares 30% better on outcome measures. That's a big deal. It's actually more than 30% because we're actually included in the larger study. So our data is in there. But even with our data in the larger study of wellness therapy programs, our clients have 30% better outcomes. So we're looking at that. We were the first wellness therapy program to really invest in a research department, full-time research staff. We believe that doing research makes us better, and we go back to our roots. But we're innovative, but we go back to our roots. We have not decided to go along with the recreational therapy movement, the adventure therapy movement. There's a place for that in the world, but we don't think it's as effective, and the research would lend itself to this. We don't think it's as effective at building resiliency and grit and transformation in a family and a child as primitive living nomadic wilderness therapy. Clinical sophistication. I almost didn't put that because there's a lot of programs that will talk about clinical sophistication. I think what makes what we do exceptional is we work on countertransference a lot. And the countertransference is how you feel about the client. Are you judging them? Are you frustrated with them? If so, that's a you issue. Do you have compassion, patience, curiosity with them? Right? We want to look at our part, our participation in it. That transcends all the models, all the theories, all the techniques and tools. Those are fine. Those are helpful. We all use them. But if you haven't got this countertransference thing worked out and become part of your practice, all that other stuff doesn't matter. Because if you don't like your client, or you're judging your client, or you're patronizing your client, they'll feel it. And there are no shortcuts and there's no faking it. And we believe that therapy is not about problem solving. That Evoke therapy programs is not about creating well-behaved and cooperative children. It's not about getting in line. We believe that therapy is about helping somebody develop a self. We believe that with children, and we believe that with parents. I talk about this in terms of wilderness therapy. I took a class in college where we studied Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the basic idea was if you didn't take care or you weren't able to get your basic needs met, you couldn't work on more abstract psychological needs in your life. For example, if your health was struggling, there was no way to find yourself. There was no way to get a sense of belonging because you're just working on the basics. But what we learned from primitive cultures and anthropological cultures is that it's in the context of the struggle often that people find out what it means to be a self. It's in the context of struggle that people find out what it means to belong to a community. There's lots of studies that talk about that. It's one of the difficulties that soldiers have in coming home is that there's such a bond, such a sense of tribe in the military and in wartime and in service that when they come home, they feel lost, they feel empty. And so we believe that it works out best when things are integrated. One of the earliest founders of wilderness therapy said it this way: whenever we adopted what we have come to call contrived experiences, the overall impact diminished for the participants. So exercises, workbooks, tools, lectures, clinical exercises, not as powerful as primitive living, working together, camping living, doing all of that. People often ask what a typical day is like. It varies. You have your wake up time, your mindfulness activity, your meals, your hiking, personal time to work on curriculum assignments, chores, setting up camp, building a fire. That's all a part of it. Dinner preparation and mealtime is special, and it takes a lot of people to cook and to clean. We always have group therapy every day. Then you go to sleep. There's so many elements in wilderness therapy that contribute to mental health, like diet, sleep, exercise, right? All of those things the doctor would order. But then there are standing groups, spontaneous groups that happen throughout the day, individual sessions that don't just happen with the therapist, but happen with the staff throughout the week. Layover days where we're focused on therapy a couple of days a week. They get their new laundry every week, take showers, get new food twice a week. Personal time can vary depending upon how much therapy, what kind of therapy assignments, what's the breadth of the assignments for each student. The emotional curriculum we talk about in terms of soft skills, communication skills, awareness activities, twisted thinking. And then there are hard skills, things like making a spoon, making a leather pouch, busting a fire by rubbing sticks together. And we use both, and they complement each other. And then there are therapy assignments that are traditional. Like I said, the workbooks, the books, the reading, the letters, the writing assignments. And all of that mixed together really addresses kind of the whole self. You can approach it from so many different perspectives. We believe in academics. We are an accredited school, high school, so your children can get some academic, credit, and we want them to just practice it a little bit. We want to see how they respond to study hall out there. Letters to and from home. I've seen very few versions of family therapy more effective than letter writing therapy. Many families over the years have decided to continue letter writing. I've participated in letter writing therapy as a father. It's amazing. Slows it down. Provides for coaching that's much better than real-time verbal dialoguing, oral dialoguing. Solos are times when they spend time by themselves, see how they like the company. Chores, right? I was saying to a student this week, he's an incredible verbal mind. And I was saying, it's okay to philosophize, but sometimes you have to clean the dishes, take out the kitchen garbage. And he wasn't so good at that stuff. So that was his emphasis for the week. It was all the basic stuff, all the chores. Mindfulness and meditation activities every day. Service to each other, to the forest service, to the outdoors. Young adults have an oasis they go to every 2 or 3 weeks where they can take showers indoor toilets, sleep inside, cook inside, take some time to pause. And everything becomes grist for the therapeutic mill. Everything. That's what's great about wilderness. It's all therapy. And for many of our clients and students, the therapy sessions are a reference point. They're a point to anchor the rest of the week, but the therapy is the stuff that happens in between. Here's a student. I'm showing pictures. If you're watching the webinar, I'm showing pictures of a student busting a fire. It's a fantastic exercise. We use Native American myth and culture to get the child out of kind of the way that they're thinking, have them thinking about it from a different perspective. Showing you a picture of a pack here. Somebody packed a pack, and how, like I said, those become metaphors for their life, for the burdens that they're carrying. You learn to pack a pack from the staff in a way that it feels more comfortable, doesn't strain your back. And similarly, we do the same thing therapeutically with the students. The distance that the separation creates, it's painful. I have empathy for every parent because I've been through it more than once. And it creates the opportunity to develop a sense of self, a differentiated sense of self. And then letter writing therapy, slowing things down, learning to communicate, learning in black and white to see what you've written, to see what you read, not reacting in real time, 2 or 3 days to respond to the letter. The staff make a difference, folks. These staff are amazing people. Those of you who have met them, who have been out to the field, who have come to the workshops at either of our programs, know that for sure. Wilderness therapy is the delivery method, right? But understand, we overlay that with traditional therapeutic evidence-based skills. We are informed at Evoke by attachment theory, the building block of the self, the building block of resiliency, the building block of healthy brain development. Joseph Campbell, the idea that this is a heroic journey, that everybody experiences transformation, and that what we set out for at the start of the journey might not be what we get in the end, but in the end we'll get a new version of ourselves, a more authentic version of ourselves. Developmental psychology is a part of it, family systems theory, of course, cognitive behavioral 12-step, dialectical behavioral therapy, play therapy. The language of children is experiential. A lot of children don't know how to talk about their issues, aren't aware of them. Some of the trauma is pre-verbal or non-verbal, and so you use play therapy ideas and principles, experiential therapy, to access and to heal those unknowable wounds and traumas. Like I said, Evoke's outcomes are on an average 30% greater than industry averages. So it's an evidence-based program, family support and education, and whole health. I'm happy to answer any live questions that might come up for any of you. If not, I can go to upcoming events. We ask all current families to attend 6 12-step support groups. Any combination of Al-Anon, Codependence Anonymous, or Families Anonymous. You can go to the web and find meetings in your area. You can also go to NAMI.org, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, and find resources, classes in your area that are affordable. All of these broadcasts are available on podcasts. So you can listen to them on the go on your iPhone or iOS device. Go to the podcast app and search Evoke Therapy Programs. On your Android device, download the SoundCloud app and search Evoke Therapy Programs. And then if you're on any computer, go to soundcloud.com and search Evoke Therapy Programs. On Twitter and Instagram, please follow us at Evoke Therapy for inspirational stories, pictures, ideas, concepts, lessons. On Facebook, you can search Evoke Therapy Programs. You can find the Evoke Family Foundation on Facebook if you want to become involved in a charitable organization made up of alumni families who raise money to help people who can't afford therapy. And then, of course, our blog. My book, The Journey of the Heroic Parent, is available on Amazon. Upcoming workshops, we have one coming up this weekend. If you haven't signed up now, you probably aren't coming. And the one that follows is that in Toronto, October 13th and 14th. Email melanie@evoketherapy.com for more information or to RSVP. If you want to do a deeper dive into your own work, come to our lodge in Park City, Utah for a 4.5-day workshop looking into yourself. It's healing. I recommend it. I do it for myself at least once a year. The next one is October 17th to 21st. It's called Finding You. You can go to our website or email us at intensives@evoketherapy.com. If you've been to a workshop already, been to an intensive already, come to Finding You too. I'll be running those. And we also are excited to announce we're having our first alumni intensive. If your child has been through our wilderness therapy program, and they are at the date of the intensive, an adult, so they could have been an adolescent, they are an adult, they are welcome to come to our alumni intensives in December or January that I'll be running. It's indoors, it's comfortable, with tasty, healthy food, meditation and mindfulness activities, art therapy, group therapy, and experiential therapy. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. All right, I'm going to be in Birmingham, Alabama, Friday, October 26th, in Chicago, Illinois, Tuesday, November 6th, New York City on November 12th, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on November 14th. For more information about any of these events, please email melanie@evoketherapy.com and let us know that you're going. We do have short-term trips for people who want a therapy refresher or a family experience or sober fun. It's our Pursuits program. You can check out our website. No live questions have come in. Our next broadcast will be next week, September 26th. I haven't yet decided on the topic, so I'll get that out as soon as possible. Wednesday, September 26th, look for the invite in your email box. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, Alex, for moderating. I hope this is helpful. Feel free to share this one with friends and family who may not understand what we're doing. Feel free to share it with professionals in your life who may not understand what we're doing, because there's a lot of misunderstandings and mystery surrounding wilderness therapy and Evoke therapy programs especially. Take care, folks. I'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.